Good evening and welcome to Getaway Day. My name is Gautam. His name is Mason. This is episode 98, and today we're talking about the National League Central as we continue our division previews. Go check out the previous four that we've put out in the last 4 weeks. We'll finish with the NL Central and then the AL East next week. And then a week from then, it'll be opening week. So we've got about 2+ weeks of spring training and then regular season baseball. What's going on today, Mason?
Technology's just not there. That's what's going on today.
It happens.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Well.
Anyway, we're going to get past that. We're talking about the National League Central, which if you know anything about myself and Gautam, this is our bread and butter. This is where we grew up. This could be a very, very, very long conversation if we're not careful. So I am excited for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And kind of what I think we should try to focus on today is what's been going on at camp. What are the key battles going on with these 5 teams? There are a lot of opportunities up for grabs on these 5 teams, maybe a little different than some of the other divisions we've talked about thus far. I just see a lot of interesting stuff going on in these 5 teams camps. So we're going to get into all of that here.
Before we do, I kind of have a comment that goes along with that. The reason for all these camp battles and all of these kind of this being a division that seems to be trying to find its own self-image. This is not the strongest division in the major leagues. Like we've talked about that. We've already talked about the NL East. Did we talk about the AL East?
No,
that's next week. Okay. We've talked about the NL East. We've talked about the NL West. We've talked about how the AL West is significantly improved, but the Centrals have been kind of the weakest divisions for years. Like you usually get one team that kind of runs away with it. You get another team who's maybe in the wild card hunt, and then 3 teams that are nowhere near it. And that's where this division has been for the last couple of years. And you see that in teams like the Pirates and the Reds, who have been consistently rebuilding for the last, 4 or 5 years. Well, they're starting to get, that's part of the reason they have some camp battles, but they also have some young guys who are trying to make the team and could make these teams into something better than they've been. Then you have the Cubs, who are kind of in between the competitive and that same level as the Reds and the Pirates. And then you have the Brewers and the Cardinals, who they've been the top of the division the last couple of years, but they've not been elite at the top of the division. So we're starting to see a changeover across all of these teams to what they're going to look like here for the next 4, 5, 6 years. So that's what makes this a really, really interesting division. Not just the fact that it's our favorite division. So that's kind of why we waited as long as we did to do this, because we knew there was going to be some of these camp battles going on. So I just wanted to use that as a little precursor to the conversation here before we get into the comeuppance that is the NL Central.
Do you want to start at the bottom of the division, top of the division, somewhere in the middle? Any team in particular?
Let's start at the bottom of the division, because I know that both you and I could probably talk for about an hour alone about our own teams. So
in that case, I think we should start at the top.
You think so?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
let's go ahead and start with the Cardinals. So the Cardinals are the clear favorite in this division. I think most people would agree on that. They're bringing back most of their key players to the lineup. Most of their guys from the starting rotation were on the team last year too. They did bring in Wilson Contreras. But outside of that, the biggest thing going on with the Cardinals right now is how is this lineup really going to shake out? They've got so many excellent bats who are young players, up and coming guys. They're all fighting for roles and everyday playing time for the most part. So let's talk through those guys, I guess.
Yeah, so just in the outfield, the Cardinals have about 6, maybe 7 viable options right now. there are realistically 4, maybe 5 spots if one of those guys could be the primary DH as well. But I'll mention in a minute, DH kind of becomes a little bit of a sticky situation as well. But in this outfield, you have the what do you call them? The ones that were already there. The incumbents. You have the incumbents in Dylan Carlson, Lars Nootbaar, and Tyler O'Neill. And I think we would be doing a disservice by not talking about these guys first, because they're all having pretty decent springs. I mean, you have O'Neill, who's trying to be center field for the Cardinals for the first time since he was a prospect. He went out and he got a little bit more limber this year. He is able to move a little bit better, and you can see it in his fielding. That is something that has been a huge detractor to his career so far, because he keeps getting injured with hamstring tightness and all this that they think is because he's a power lifter. So starting to do a little bit more calisthenics, get those hamstrings loosened up. We might be able to see.
I mean, what happened when Judge started doing yoga? He went out and hit 62 home runs.
Yeah, exactly. And he stayed on the field the whole year.
He did.
So the Cardinals are hoping that that's what they're going to see out of Tyler O'Neill. We saw how good he could be back in 2021. He's such a good player when he's on the field. So they're hoping that this will get him on the field and keep him there. Well, if he's taking center field, what does that mean for the guy who was the primary center fielder last year in Dylan Carlson? And Dylan's not necessarily going to lose a spot, I don't think, but he is definitely being put on notice right now that he needs to show up or he needs to get out of the way.
Yeah, and the big thing with Carlson is that he was playing through injury last year too. He had a thumb injury. He really played very poorly in the second half. He mentioned that he might have been compensating, doing some things with this swing in the second half that caused him to not hit the ball with a lot of authority. Really was not hitting for any power at all in the second half. Still played really good defense, so that might give him a leg up against some of these guys, but the other guys that he's competing against also are pretty good defenders in their own right. So I feel like Carlson right now is the guy that has a lot to prove, and he's the least secure in a role, even if he may get it initially to start the season.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit concerned because his spring is not going particularly well from an offensive standpoint either.
He's got a couple home runs, right?
He's got a couple home runs, but he's also only batting 185, which, I mean, it's spring, so he struck out 11 times in 27 ABs, so that's a lot. He's not showing early improvement over the last couple of years, because this is a guy that we were so incredibly hyped for back in 2021 when he came, or 2020 when he came 2020. Up. So not necessarily seeing the strides early, but that's exactly it. It's early. So we still have a lot of season to go. In fact, we have an entire season to go. But his opening day status is a little bit in limbo because of the guy that's playing out on Team Japan. And that is Lars Nootbaar. Yeah. And Lars, so I think Lars went from being a no-name, not a prospect at all in 2019, didn't get to the alternate site in 2020, ended up making the team for the first time in 2021, played there a little bit and played well enough that he got a second shot. Second half of last year was amazing. And then over this offseason, it seems like everyone has gone, oh, this kid is still improving more. He might be really, really, really good. And then he showed up at the WBC, and what has he done? He's gone 6 for 14 with, I don't think he has any home runs yet. I'm trying to remember now. That's one of the things I had open that got closed, so now I have to find it again.
I don't think any home runs, but yeah, he's playing great in WBC, and he's basically become one of the biggest fantasy darlings of this fantasy draft season, because everyone's just so excited about how he combines power, patience, and plate discipline, basically. So he's got all the makings of an awesome all-around hitter. Then when you combine like his defense and base running and everything,
speed. His speed that is pretty underrated so far. But
so he's looking like he has the makings of a legitimate like star player. Whether that actually pans out, we will see this season. But he's got all the right ingredients for making that happen. So I'm excited about Nootbaar.
And then you see how he's performing for Team Japan, and I mean, it's still the first round of the WBC. So they've played some good competition. They've played some not so good competition, but this is a tournament environment. So this is high stakes for a lot of these guys, and he's making the most of it. He's playing center field for them, and he's doing it very, very well. So he's not even in Cardinals camp, but is the leadoff hitter who's hitting about 500 so far in the first 4 games, going out, playing center field, making some really good defensive plays. He's making a case to be the Cardinals opening day center fielder, and he's not even with the team right now. So, yeah, so we have all 3 incumbents from last year are vying for the same spot this year.
Yep, for sure. So all those 3 guys have different cases for making the team and being starters and everything, but the guy that's throwing a wrench in all the plans is Jordan Walker, who has just been lighting up the Grapefruit League. I think he's got a 1.135 OPS. He's hitting 405. He's got 3 home runs, 15 hits, and 37 at-bats. I mean, guy is on fire. We've seen other prospects do this before, but he's sort of forcing the Cardinals' hand, and I'd be shocked if he didn't make the opening day roster at this point.
Same. There was actually a comparison that was made here a couple weeks ago, and I'm trying to think of which writer, Ben Fredrickson, I think, of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And he made the point that the last time that the Cardinals their hands were forced by a prospect in spring training was 2001. And I think you're picking up where I'm going with this on who this player might have been, is Albert Pujols, who kind of had the same profile. I mean, way shorter guy than Jordan Walker's 6'6" frame, but a similar profile, power hitter guy, looks like he could develop into Albert wasn't a 5-tool guy. He wasn't fast. He was first baseman.
I mean, Walker's in the same camp. He's kind of fast, but he may not.
He won't always be fast. Yeah. Yes. But he's looking like he could be a 4 or 5-tool guy, potentially. More likely 4. And he's playing incredibly well into spring. So if he forces his way onto the team, there's quite a few parallels, and his skill set is there that he could become that next superstar. Excuse me. That next superstar for the Cardinals. And that's a lot of pressure that we're putting on this kid, but he seems to be running with it so far. He's not even on the 40-man yet, and he's doing pretty well at 20 years old here. So,
yeah, for sure. Definitely an impact guy. So he's gonna mix in for sure. Even if it's not opening day, he's gonna surely be up pretty soon in the season. Let's talk about some of the other guys though that are hanging around, maybe.
Yeah, so I want to start with Alec Burleson here, and I'll explain why in a minute. The Cardinals opened up a 40-man spot today. That is a good point. Thank you, chat. But yeah, so I want to talk about Alec Burleson real quick, because Alec Burleson is a guy who he is a really, really young prospect for the Cardinals as well. But he rocketed. I mean, he was out of college, so he's not like really young. But he rocketed through the minors in 2021. Went IA, AA, and AAA, all in his first year out of college. And then last year at AAA, in 109 games, he batted .331, .372, .532 with 20 homers and a 14% strikeout rate. That is phenomenal. He forced his way onto the roster late last year. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time, but when he was there, he struggled a bit. In 16 games, he was hitting like 188, striking out 17% of the time, but walked a ton. And so this is a guy that, as he plays this year, he's basically, I don't think, making the opening day roster at this point. I think Walker's basically taken his spot. But this is a guy that is doing everything that he can to force his way onto this club. And I think he's going to make it soon. He's been playing incredibly well at every level, and he's been doing well this spring as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he can definitely hit. I think the one thing maybe I put him behind the other guys right now is maybe the defense.
Yes.
I haven't heard that he's like a super amazing outfielder. He's behind the three incumbents, and obviously if Walker's there, he's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, Burleson is a first baseman first. Obviously, that's a little bit of an issue if you're a Cardinals prospect at first base, as Juan Yepes could very well tell you. So he's likely going to be in left field if that's an option. I think they're... Oh, shoot. He's knocking over a whole bunch of baseball cards. So Jordan Walker has been playing right field in the minors here last year. And so it looks like they're going to try and open up right field for him. If that's the case, you're going to have to basically open up left field for Burleson if he makes it, if he makes the case for it, which obviously is a little weird because you'd end up having to probably trade one of Carlson, O'Neill, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, it seems like left field is really the only spot Burleson could get in unless he muscles his way into a full-time DH spot. Which is kind of where Juan Yepes is saying, hold up, this is still my position. Was these two are in a very, very similar boat. Burleson has the higher batting average, but Juan Yepes has the power. And I don't think anyone would argue those 2 points. Juan Yepes last year in 76 games, 253, 296, 447, 12 home runs, and he was a part-time player behind Albert Pujols. And Albert helped him a lot, helped him work on his swing. I'm really excited to see how that translates. But he does not have a defensive position. He is not good in the outfield. And that is where he's slotted. So his position really is DH. So if Burleson makes the case that he needs to be on the club, who loses their spot? Is it one of Tyler O'Neill or Dylan Carlson? Or is it a guy like Juan Yepes? It's one of those that I guess we're just going to have to wait and see who's not performing, and that guy loses his spot.
I think that's what's really interesting about this is because none of the outfielders are super established. Obviously, O'Neill and Carlson maybe a little bit more, but they're still youngish players to the point where they don't have big contracts. They're not guaranteed any spot. So this one feels like it's completely based on how they actually perform. And if you're not playing well, you're gonna get replaced because there are really, really good options behind every spot.
Yeah, and we still have 2 years of Tyler O'Neill. So before he ends up becoming a free agent. So it's one of those that it's not like this is going to resolve this year. We've got a couple years before this situation is really truly resolved or somebody just takes it and runs with it.
Right. So, well, obviously there's the possibility for trade as well.
Well, yes, but I mean, this isn't the trade talk conversation.
No. And then if we expand this conversation to the infield with the second base role, I guess it's not really a battle, I'd say, between Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan because Donovan's going to get in the lineup. Most likely he's going to mix and match because he can play basically every single position, play second, short, third, play the outfield. I mean, if he's doing what he did last year, there's no question he's going to be in the lineup quite a bit, if not every day. Gorman has been looking pretty good in spring as well. And his ideal role, I would say, is kind of more DH than at second base.
So Gorman is the other big competition with Yepes and Burleson. Right. A guy who's not really as great defensively, although he rated out a lot higher as a defensive player last year than I think we're giving him credit for. And he's been working on it this year as well. So I would expect him to continue improving. He's just not on the level of Brendan Donovan from a defense standpoint, and he never will be. But Gorman kind of changed his swing up a little bit this year to focus on getting to high pitches because he was great at smashing off-speed pitches. 9 of his first 10 home runs were off-speed pitches that he put over 400 feet away. Great at hitting off-speed. He was really, really struggling to catch up to any high fastball. So far this spring, I think the very first pitch he saw this spring was like a 97 mile an hour like fastball at the top of the zone. He turned it for a double. And he's been doing it pretty consistently. Like he's figured out his flaw with his swing, and he is making a case to be the everyday DH. And he'll factor in at second base some, probably not more than like a third of the games, I'm guessing, max. But yeah, I think DH is Gorman's spot to lose. Yepes
at
and
the
Burleson.
worst, it seems like it could be more of a platoon situation. Obviously, mixing and matching with giving guys days off and things. But with Gorman being the lefty, you could see him getting the majority of the DH at bats.
Yes. Now the other, but yeah, I guess my point was his battle isn't so much with Donovan; it's with the other DH candidates.
Yeah.
But Donovan is not completely safe here because Cardinals shortstop prospect Mason Wynn has kind of showed up in spring, and he's been really good. He's a bit farther away from the majors. He's not going to take an opening day spot. I could guarantee that. But this is a kid who, if he continues playing the way that he is and does it at AAA here for the first 2 months, he could force the Cardinals' hand to bring him up in about 2 months, at which point you've now got 2 shortstops, 2 second basemen, 6 outfielders. This is a really good problem to have if you're the Cardinals.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, they've got a lot of depth, and they seem actually equipped to handle some injuries.
Yes.
Bad performances and whatever else happens.
Yeah. I definitely think that there is a time where we need to probably go through the Cardinals pitching, but I don't think that is now because there's not so much a battle at the starting pitching spot, but there are some young guys that are kind of doing what Mason Wynn is doing or could do what Mason Wynn is doing. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cardinals, like they've got 5 set starters, all major league veteran pitchers. So for right now, they'll go with those guys, and we won't hit on that here. Ready to move on to the Brewers?
Well, no, because I would love to continue talking about the Cardinals, but yes, we can move on to the Brewers if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah. So Brewers, they're probably the second best team, at least on paper. They did make quite a few changes to their team over the winter. They've got new faces. William Contreras is their starting catcher. They brought in Jesse Winker. They've got younger guys competing for roles in the starting lineup like Garrett Mitchell, Bryce Terang, who were former first-round picks. And then they sent out guys like Hunter Renfroe, Colton Wong. Who am I missing?
Oh, shoot. I think those were the 2 big ones.
Big ones, yeah. So basically, when I look at this team generally, I see like a very solid team. I can't see a scenario where the Brewers are really bad and they lose like 60, if they win like 65 games. Like that's just not going to happen. At the worst, this is like a 500 team because they've got such strong starting pitching. They're bringing back all their starters. They brought in Wade Miley. And then the top half of their lineup is just very quality, above average major leaguers like Christian Yelich, Willy Adames, Rowdy Tellez, Contreras. It's kind of like the second half of the lineup where I'm thinking like this is going to make or break their season. Jesse Winker feels like an incredibly important guy to this lineup.
Yeah. So my first thought when I just look at the lineup here for the Brewers is that this might be the best lineup they've had in a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, it has question marks, but so is literally every lineup they've rocked out there for the last like 10 years, and they've been fine for a long time. Like they get by with their pitching, but this is also the highest upside lineup that they've had. Like they've got some pretty high prospects down here in Garrett Mitchell and Bryce Terang, as you mentioned. You have Jesse Winker, who we saw what he could do in Great American Ballpark. He really struggled when he went out west, but now we're bringing him back to the NL Central with weaker pitching, with more more hitter-friendly ballparks. He's going to play 81 games in Miller Park, American Family Field.
American Family Field.
I think he's probably going to do fine. He's going to be better than last year. There's going to be regression to the mean. Yeah. How much? I don't know. I kind of am expecting a lot. But if we don't get a lot, I mean, they've got some other guys here. They've got the ability to go and platoon guys like Winker, Garrett Mitchell, and Bryce Terang with Keston Hura, Owen Miller, and Mike Brousseau. Those three guys I'm a little less high on, but oh well, they'll figure something out. And then they do still have Sal Frelick, Frelick. We haven't figured out how to pronounce his name yet. If someone knows, please let me know. He could be forcing his way into that conversation pretty soon as well. So that'd be nice to get Brian Anderson out of there.
Yeah, definitely. And even Anderson's he feels like sort of an upgrade off what they've had kind of at the bottom of their lineup too. He's not a superstar player, but he's competent when he's healthy. I feel like he's a starting caliber player. I really think this lineup's kind of interesting, just the way it could be built. If a guy like Frelick comes up, he's super contact oriented, makes a ton of contact. This guy's impossible to strike out. And then when you contrast him with guys like William Contreras, Willie Adames, like major power guys that kind of strike out a lot. So they could have a really interesting, cool mix of hitters. And yeah, I think I agree that this is the best lineup that they've had in several years now.
Yeah. And this team could very easily give the Cardinals a run for their money, especially with some of the rotation issues that I alluded to that the Cardinals may have. Because if they can pitch, which they can, they've got Burns and Woodruff and Peralta and Eric Lauer, and then they bring in Wade Miley. They can pitch. Their bullpen, also pretty darn solid here with Adrian Hauser, Devin Williams, the Joel Piamps, I think was. Oh, he just came over in a trade. Never mind. So we don't know how he is necessarily. But like they have some guys who have been pretty good for them out of their bullpen, even without Josh Hader, even without Taylor Rogers. So this is a team that could very easily take the division here if the Cardinals aren't careful and don't figure out their pitching side. So
yeah. They're not the best at anything, but they're not bad at anything. All aspects of this team are like they have a very high floor, I'll say.
Yeah, and a very high floor can win a World Series. So
yeah,
make the playoffs, and as long as they actually have a decently high hitting floor for the first time in years, this could be a World Series contender. Not one of the like top of the line ones that you're going to look at. You're not going to put them in there with the Phillies and the Mets and the Braves, but for the Astros, they're probably second tier.
I do think that it's going to be hard for the second team in this division to make the playoffs, right? Because of what we've talked about in the NL East, NL West, very strong divisions. It seems like the wild cards are going to come out of those divisions. So uphill battle for the second place team in this division.
Yeah. So with that being the case, you really like being the Cardinals right now, and on paper, at least, being maybe the better team. But that also gives a little bit of an incentive to the Brewers, where they got a chip on their shoulder. They're like, everyone's counting us out, and then go out and prove everyone wrong. This team could win 95 games. Wouldn't be shocked. And unless they win 95 games, it feels like they wouldn't be able to get in as a wild card. So
yeah, that is a challenge. Yeah. So another part of this team is the pitching, and Corbin Burns is the ace of the staff. And the Brewers had a little bit of a interesting situation with him in his arbitration case, where they went to trial with him, and they beat Corbin Burns, and they're going to pay him $10.01 million this year instead of $10.75 that he had asked for. So we're talking about
that was the entire difference.
We're talking about less than $1 million difference
for him,
for a former Cy Young winner. Probably I can very easily make the case that he's the best pitcher in the league. And he was not thrilled, to say the least. He had some very strong words basically ripping the Brewers for the way that they talked about him. Kind of, he was saying that they were blaming him for being the reason they didn't make the playoffs last year, which is utterly ridiculous. He was the reason they did as well as they did.
Yeah, no, that would be on the GM and not having anyone to put up runs.
Yeah. He was the last.
I'm fairly certain that Burns doesn't hit.
And if he did hit, he'd probably do pretty well, I guess. But the question that I have to ask about Corbin Burns is, if the Brewers somehow do fall out of this, does Corbin Burns get traded mid-season this year? It's the last year that he's under control with the Brewers. I just do not see a way he signs back with the Brewers with how unhappy he's got to be with,
he's got
their whole.
He's got one more year of ARB.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Okay, but still, I feel like he could be a guy that would get traded because is Corbin Burns going to sign back with the Brewers? No.
At this point, no.
Yeah.
And he probably wouldn't have anyway. But this is probably just the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Why does it's not David Stearns. Who is it now?
Matt Arnold.
Why's Matt Arnold got to go out and cause a comeuppance like this?
I don't know. It's a mistake. You got to keep your people happy.
Such a kerfuffle.
Right. We kind of talked about some of these young players, but I'll just mention again. So Tyrone Taylor, who probably would have had a starting role, has a fractured elbow. So there's a lot of outfielders. Garrett Mitchell being one of them. Sal Frelick waiting in AAA. Tyler Naquin is a non-roster invitee with this club. He might make the team. Do you have any thoughts on any of these guys? Maybe Mitchell. We haven't talked about him.
Yeah, Garrett Mitchell is really intriguing to me. And I have a friend that if I didn't talk about Garrett Mitchell, I think he would probably fly down to Indiana and kick my butt. But yeah, Garrett Mitchell is a really, really good young player. He was a 20th overall pick back in 2020 in that kind of weird draft where they only have 5 rounds. But he's a guy who's got speed, fielding. His hit tool is pretty good. He's got a lot of raw power. I'm not sure how it's going to translate to game power, though. But last year, in a really, really short cup of coffee of 28 games, so not a really short, but in a cup of coffee, he did hit 311, 373, 359, hit 2 home runs, stole 8 bases. The problem is that he struck out 41% of the time. So if he can fix his strikeout issue, I think Garrett Mitchell is the everyday center fielder, and I don't think there's really a whole lot that anyone can do to change that. Like, he walked 9% of the time last year, and that's kind of low for his it's kind of low for his career in the minors. So he's a really good player. It's weird because it's like his plate discipline, he's got good enough plate discipline to walk a ton, yet he strikes out 41% of the time. So I don't know if he's just got a contact issue, but then he's got a 311 average. So
yeah, but that's 68 plate appearances. So
yeah,
maybe take with it what you will. But if he can cut down the strikeout rate, then yeah, I don't see why he wouldn't be a really valuable player. And even if he's not a superstar, like with the great defense, great speed, he's going to be really valuable for this team.
I mean, just kind of looking at what his profile is as a player, he kind of looks to me like he could be what Lorenzo Cain kind of was. What Lorenzo Cain was, period. Fast guy, gets you a lot of steals, can hit the ball pretty well, but
Lorenzo Cain had really good contact steals, though. That's the difference.
True, but historically, throughout his minor league career, so is Garrett Mitchell. So it's like, if he can fix that at the major league level, I think we're looking at a guy who you could probably comp to Lorenzo Cain. Like, he's not a big power hitter, but he's a really good player that you definitely want to have on your team. Great defense in center field. Like, that's kind of where I see his ceiling. So, plus same team, so like, but yeah.
So
I don't really have any comments about free liquor terrain though. So
okay. Yeah, so that's the Brewers. Let's move on to the Cubs, who have made all kinds of changes to their team. They gave out over $300 million in contracts this year. They weren't good last year, but they improved a lot. They're not a great team, but they've improved probably more than any other team in this division since last year. And you can see it just all around the diamond, basically. At each position, so the big move they made, they brought in Dansby Swanson on the 7-year, $177 million deal. He's their one of their core pieces now going forward, and that in effect moved Nico Horner, who played shortstop last year, to second base. So that's an upgrade at second base. They brought in Cody Bellinger to play center field. That was a huge problem spot for the team last year. Now they've got a great defender who has MVP caliber talent. Whether he ever gets back there, we don't know. They brought in Jameson Taillon to bolster the starting rotation. And then at first base, they brought in Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer, Edwin Rios, and then they've got Matt Mervis in the minor leagues. So basically, most of the positions on the diamond, they've actually improved with a few exceptions, I guess. First, do you have any thoughts on the moves that the Cubs made in the offseason?
I hope they all fail. No, I'm really intrigued by this because the Cody Bellinger signing, I like that a lot. I think Cody Bellinger, I think he needed to change of scenery. I think a new hitting coach is going to help him pick one swing and figure something out to get him back, at least partially, to where he was as an MVP. I don't know that he'll ever get there again, but I do really like that move, is getting a guy in a bounce back candidate that is a great center fielder. And we know his bat is potent when it's right. So love that move. Dansby Swanson. Yeah. Love getting Dansby in. Great defensive shortstop. Had kind of a career season with the bat last year. Nick Madrigal kind of ends up losing his spot at second base. Is Nico Horner, who has proven himself very, very good, moves over to take that spot. Where I am questioning a lot of the moves, and I know you know this, is first base. Like, I get it. I get going out and getting a free agent first baseman, getting Mancini. I get maybe getting Edwin Rios. But like, why have we got 3 guys to block a prospect that we think could be pretty good? Like, there's something else to this that we're not being told. Like, do they hate Matt Mervis?
That's the logical question, because the guy raked at 3 levels and the Arizona Fall League this past season. Seemed like he was gonna get the keys to the kingdom and go take first base, but clearly they have other ideas for him. I don't know whether that he's got some deficiency that needs to be corrected before he's ready, or they just want some safety with these picks. Like, I feel like with Eric Hosmer, he's going to be the starting first baseman on opening day. And if he doesn't perform in the first month of the season, they can just cut bait with him. It's not like they have anything tied up with him.
He's on the minimum.
What?
So we know how Eric Hosmer is April MVP every year, right?
Yeah, he hit like 400 last April.
So we picked up Eric Hosmer for the month of April, cut him on May 1. Then you have Edwin Rios, who I think hit that in the park home run in the month of May. Did he have one? He didn't have one.
Edwin Rios,
he's not fast.
Very slow.
I'm thinking a different guy that was on the Dodgers. But Edwin Rios probably hit a home run in the month of May in the past. So get him for May and then cut him. And then you have Trey Mancini for the month of June. He won't be cut because Trey Mancini's a good guy to have around, and he's actually still a decent player. But then Mervis will be ready come July. Okay, this all makes sense to me.
Yeah, but they're building some depth there, so I'm not too upset about it. The one thing that they've already been tested with is some injury. So Seiya Suzuki, who has the potential to be their best hitter, went down with an oblique strain right before the first Cactus League game. So he's going to be missing the start to this season. And what does that mean for the team? It means that someone has to play right field, and that's probably Mancini a lot to start this year. They have other guys in camp like Mike Talkman, and then younger guys like Nelson Velasquez who can maybe play right field to start the year. But yeah. And then the other question is third base. So third base is the one very obvious spot that they did not upgrade because there were not really very good options on the free agent market. They've got a whole host of guys.
Figured out who the inside the park home run guy is. He is also on the Cubs. It was Zach McKinstry.
Yeah. So he's there for his inside the park home run in May.
Yeah.
Yeah. So third base, last year, Patrick Wisdom played there quite a bit. He has shown that he can mash left-handed pitchers. Pretty decent defender. I think he's going to play a good bit at third and first this season. Then they've got other guys like Rios can play some third. Zach McKinstry can move around the diamond, play a little bit. And they've been actually trying Nick Madrigal at third base. And at first thought, it's like, he's not at third base, but he can barely play second base, you know? How can he even make that throw?
And then at second thought, you're like, he's not a third baseman. He can barely play second base.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and then you go talk to Christopher Morel.
Yeah. So I honestly don't know how this is gonna shake out. I feel like the fact that they are doing the Madrigal experiment at third base means that they kind of want to give him some more runway, which I get. He was a big prospect at one time, and maybe his skill set can finally come through a year removed from his very bad hamstring injury that he had in 2021.
Yeah. So who's this Mastra Bona Beef guy?
Yeah, so he's a guy that they traded for this past offseason from the Rays. He's another kind of do-it-all, contact-oriented guy that can just play all around the diamond. So Cubs are kind of building some versatility. And we haven't even mentioned Christopher Morel, who can play pretty much any position. I don't know if he's going to start with the team right away, but they want to get him some more time in AAA because he basically skipped that level last year. But when he comes up, I'm sure they'll slot him in all around the diamond.
All right. Also, you just glanced over the fact that I called him Mashed Bona Beef.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm disappointed in you. I thought that you were.
I think it's a good nickname.
It is. They brought him in because he's gonna sell more Bona Beef at the stadium.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. There's one other camp battle we can talk about here that's going on with the fifth starter job on the Cubs. So they've got basically their top four guys locked in with Marcus Stroman, Jamison Taillon, Justin Steele, and Drew Smyly. The fifth job is between Adrian Sampson, who is randomly very good last year for the Cubs with a 3.11 ERA in 104 innings. But this spring, I usually don't try to delve too deep into the spring training results, but he's given up 6 home runs in 4 1/3 innings and 10 runs. So not a great spring for Adrian Sampson. Meanwhile, his competition, Hayden Wesneski, has been absolutely dominant. He hasn't given up a single run in 8 2/3 innings with 11 strikeouts. So to me, I think Wesneski has basically won himself this job. And I'm very excited to see what he does. He's a guy that they brought over from the Yankees in a trade at the trade deadline last year. Insanely good slider. not the best fastball, doesn't have amazing velocity, but that slider is absolutely like one of the top sliders in the game right now, I would say.
Also, his name is Wesneski, and I love it.
Yeah,
So
great name.
I might get a Wesneski jersey. Who knows?
Yeah, so overall, Cubs have improved their team quite a bit. They really are trying to see what they can get out of some of these like 1 year guys like Cody Bellinger, Eric Hosmer. Maybe catch lightning in a bottle for a month or whatever, just like the Padres did last year. But
and they don't really have a whole lot of financial ties with Hosmer, right? Because
no,
he's
they're
still
paying him the
getting
league
paid
minimum.
by. Yeah, I was going to say he's still getting paid by Boston, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So now we've come to the rebuilding teams, the Pirates and the Reds. So the Pirates, they brought in a bunch of very old guys like Rich Hill, who's the oldest player in the league. He's 43.
It's not his name.
It's not his name, but that's what I'm going to call him. Nickname.
Oh, okay. We're going with his nickname. Cool.
Yeah. Carlos Santana to play first base, and along with G-Man Choi, Austin Hedges is going to be their catcher to start the season. So with these guys, like what exactly are the Pirates doing, bringing in a bunch of old dudes for their team?
Okay, so at face value, this looks like the great value brand 2021 San Francisco Giants. Because they're trying to load up with a bunch of old guys who were good in the past and trying to make them be amazing for one more year. Same that the Giants got out of a resurgent Buster Posey in his final season, out of Evan Longoria, out of Brandon Belt, out of it feels like they're trying to go that route to hopefully get some production around young guys like Ke'Bryan Hayes and O'Neal Cruz. And center fielder that does not want to still be on the team, Brian Reynolds. I don't think it's going to work because I don't think Hedges is quite Buster Posey. I don't think G-Man Choi is quite what we got from Brandon Belt in 2021. I don't think Carlos Santana is quite anything anymore. I love Andrew McCutchen, though, so fine with it. Plus, that one actually has like a lot of sentimental reasons for the club. Like, there's a lot of reasons to bring back McCutchen. Love it. Glad they did it. But I don't think that they're going to be able to catch lightning in a bottle like the Giants did.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, these are not top tier free agents by any means. They're all like not even like the B level. These are like C tier free agents that wouldn't have probably found many other teams that would actually take them. And that's what they spent their money on. And we can hope that these guys are just placeholders and they've got lots of guys coming, and they actually do have a very good farm system right now, but they're guys not necessarily 2023 impact. So you bring those guys in, they'll probably, add a couple wins maybe to this team overall. But this team, like, I can't see them being very good this year at all, even though I can see the makings of a good team.
Yeah.
When you look at the farm system and you look at some of the players that are actually on the team, let's focus on those guys. So you mentioned O'Neal Cruz and Ke'Bryan Hayes. Those guys are the core of the team.
Yeah.
O'Neal Cruz, we got to talk about him. Like,
I mean, you got what, a 6'6" shortstop with like elite speed, absolutely massive power.
The best arm in Major League Baseball, maybe.
Yeah, until Mason Wynn comes up, and then it's the two of them going head to head, and I don't know which one has a better arm, to be honest.
Yeah, so the thing that the Pirates have that, maybe half the teams in the major leagues don't have is a guy that could legitimately win the MVP at some point in his career. he is that talented. He has such loud skills that he could be Aaron Judge. I'm not saying he is Aaron Judge or anything, but he literally could be Aaron Judge. And not a lot of teams have a guy on their team that can do that.
Yeah. And he could be Aaron Judge with steals.
Yeah.
Which I would almost argue is
and
better.
A shortstop. Yeah.
Well, Judge is a center fielder. I would say, like, yeah, shortstop is technically still a step above, but I'm not gonna knock Aaron Judge in that conversation because he does also play a very important elite defensive position. So
yeah, I wasn't knocking Judge at all.
Well, yeah, but then they've also got Ke'Bryan Hayes, who has not broken out to where I think people were hoping. I think he maybe got a little bit overhyped in some of his skills because he was the first of a line of prospects that were going to come up and be the face of this team moving forward.
He also had an incredible debut that kind of falsely advertised that he was going to be some kind of like power hitter. That was never his profile coming up through the minors, and he went crazy in the shortened season, and then people were disappointed when he didn't hit for that much power the last 2 years. He is the best third base defender in the league. He makes a lot of contact. He can steal bases. He's pretty much got like all the makings of an amazing player. His one problem is he hits too many balls into the ground. And I don't know if that's something that can be fixed.
Well, and honestly, I think that's part of the power thing. Like, I think he does have power. He just hasn't found it yet. It's going the wrong direction. It's G-Man Choi. He's G-Man Choiing it.
He's Yandy Diaz, you mean?
Yeah, that's the same thing. They're the same person. They're not. But yes, he's Yandy Diazing it. But yeah, and so he was kind of the first of the line of succession here. Then you get O'Neal Cruz. And then a guy that I think people don't really think about too much. They've got some power there in Jack Sawinski as well. And he played really well last year. He's taken over the center field role. Brian Reynolds has shifted over to the corner. And Jack Sawinski could be their next like big outfielder. And I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see it, to be honest. Then you got some of these other prospects that they've got in the system. That I think Nick Gonzalez is maybe end of the year. He's probably in the majors playing second base. You do have Rodolfo Castro, who's there right now. You've got Liover Peguero, who I think could be up this year. Like, they've got a lot of other young guys. So it does make a little bit of sense that they went out and got all these new old guys with the intention of them being superseded by the young guys when they're ready.
Yeah, totally. That second base job is kind of interesting. With Rodolfo Castro, he's a guy that has like really big power, super young, maybe wasn't ready last year. He talked about how he, didn't feel like he was that ready. And then he had that incident where his phone fell out of his pocket during a game. So hopefully he's learned his lesson that he shouldn't try to play games
leave it in his locker
during the game. Yeah, I mean, Pirates games are not that great, but probably shouldn't do that.
Well, and you can't even look at the bridge right now because it's under construction. So I get it. It makes sense to me.
They just traded for Mark Mathias, who was kind of good for the Brewers last year. Ji-Hwan Bae, he's insanely fast. But the thing is, none of these guys have really impressed that much in spring camp. So maybe it is another guy that we haven't even seen really necessarily in this competition right now, like a Peguero or someone else.
A Nick Gonzalez, one of these guys that's in AAA, really close to the majors. Like, that's what they did with Ke'Bryan, is they just kind of brought him up and put him in and said, here you go. And he's had it since. And he's been solid. So, like, they have guys who can do that.
And one of their strengths also in the minor leagues is their catching depth. So everyone knows Henry Davis, former number 1 draft pick. There's another catcher in their system, Endy Rodriguez, who was absolutely fantastic at 3 levels last year, high A, double A, triple A. He hit 302 at high A, then he hit 356 at AA, and then in just a limited amount of games, he had 455 at AAA. So this guy can really hit 25 home runs across the 3 levels. I see this guy as like a guy who's going to make an impact this year because the guy he's got to beat out is Austin Hedges. We know what Austin Hedges can do. He's a great defensive catcher. He can't really hit.
He's also got to beat out Kevin Plawecki. Don't forget Plawecki.
Yeah. So once he beats out Plawecki and Hedges, like you got Andy Rodriguez, you got Henry Davis maybe coming by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it really depends with Henry Davis how well he hits, because I think that's kind of been what's held him down, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's been hurt a lot too.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how far Henry Davis gets up this year, but I would guess by next year Henry Davis is up, and if Indy is taken off and he's awesome, you might see one of those guys get moved, kind of like Shea Langoliers did from the Braves.
First base. Yeah, or first base.
Or first base, yes, that is true.
Yeah, and then we haven't really talked about the pitching side. They don't have the best starting rotation at this point. They have a lot of number 4 and 5 starters, basically filling out the rotation. Mitch Keller sort of had his breakout last year. He became a legitimate major league caliber starter. They got Roansy Contreras,
only 3 years later than we thought it was going to happen for Mitch Keller.
He's not old. He's going to be 27 this year. Sometimes it just takes longer for these starters to finally get to where they need to be.
Yeah.
Roansy Contreras actually was pitching for the DR tonight. He's the guy that seems like he has the most upside in this rotation. I don't know if he's necessarily an ace, but he was actually pretty good last year. He only was in the majors like about half the season, but looks good. Rich Hill, obviously. JT Brubaker been there for a while now, and then they brought in Vince Velasquez. So that's kind of what's going to hinder this team more than anything. They're just not going to get very good starting pitching from this group.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that we're not seeing Johan Oviedo. He's shown with the Cardinals that he can be. I mean, he did struggle a bit at the major league level, but he's shown that he has what it takes to be a starter. He just needs a little bit more consistency, and maybe that's why he's being projected to start at AAA, but he's shown that there's nothing else that he can learn at AAA. He just needs to get starts, and this is a team that with the rotation that they've got, I don't know why he's not in it. So, but they do have some young guys that are not on the roster, and like Quinn Priester, who could be up this year, and I don't want to jinx it because this is what we said about Mitch Keller 3 years ago. Quinn Priester could be the best pitcher that they've had in their system since Garrett Cole. I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to jinx it. Because I jinxed it with Mitch Keller and I feel awful about it.
You're forgetting about all their other pitchers like Tyler Glasnow and Joe Musgrove.
Yeah, but I mean, they ended up like getting good with other teams. Whereas Garrett Cole got good with the Pirates and then went to other teams.
And got better.
Yeah. Quinn Priester has kind of that potential. He's a 22-year-old pitcher. He's at AAA now. He was the 18th overall pick back in 2019 out of high school. And so this is a guy and he pitched in the AFL last year. So like he's close. He could crack this rotation at some point. But outside of that, they really don't have anything or anyone that's eye popping in the prospect charts for pitchers. But
yeah, so that's the Pirates. Reds, let's move on to the Reds. So Reds are kind of similar to the Pirates. They do have some key differences, and that's their starting pitchers are actually watchable and exciting, starting with Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft. So those are all like young guys. Hunter Green, I mean, he's must watch basically. after seeing what he could do in the second half of last season, he was absolutely dominant, striking out like 37% of batters. Hardest starting pitcher, like hardest fastball in the majors for a starter. He's pretty awesome.
My question for you about Hunter Green: how long until he gets a Cy Young?
I could definitely see it happening in the next 3 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then they've also got Nick Lodolo, who a little bit different profile, but still phenomenal young pitcher who throws from the left side. But his slider is just absolute wipeout, and I think that is hands down his best pitch. His fastball velocity about 95, so he could still get it up there, but he's not running it up there with Hunter Green. But those two in back-to-back days, you have 100-mile-an-hour regularly from the right side, and then the next day you get basically a Chris Sale wipeout slider from the left side. Like that would be a difficult adjustment from day to day. So, and he showed last year that he could be really good as well. 103 innings, a 3.66 ERA on the Reds. Not terrible at all. 30% K rate. His walk rate was a little high at 8% or at 9%, but like he's shown that he does have what it takes to be a really good starter in the majors.
Yeah, super excited to see how those two guys do. It's after that where things get a bit fuzzy. Graham Ashcraft's kind of interesting. He throws super hard. He's got like a hard cutter. Can get it up to like 97, 98. But then like Luke Weaver, Luis Cessa, those guys are not, they're not going to be like pitching for a good Reds team probably. So, no. And then pitching in that ballpark, it's just going to be such a challenge for them to be competitive when Green and Lodolo are not pitching for them. When we get to the lineup though, that's where things get very interesting with the players that they have. It just seems like there's so many open spots for guys. We know that Jonathan India is going to be in there at second base every day. We know that Stevenson's going to be in the lineup in some capacity, whether he's catching or DHing or playing first. If Joey Votto is there, he's going to be in the lineup. We don't know if he's going to be healthy for opening day at this point. When you get past those guys, it's just, it's an open competition for all these spots. Are there any guys that are kind of interesting that are going to get a shot here?
I think the most interesting guy that already kind of has a spot locked up is probably Spencer Steer. So he's not really got a whole lot of competition over there at third base. But this is a guy who's got, as a prospect, a really good hit tool, pretty good game power, decent fielder at third base. He played in 28 games last year. He did struggle a bit at the major league level, but I mean, not many guys come up and just rake out of the gate at the majors anyway. So I don't know necessarily why I keep bringing that up, because I think I've done that to about 10 people today. But as far as guys who are maybe in a little bit of a competition, I think shortstop has a couple of interesting things where, Kevin Newman is slotted in at short, but they've got some guys who might be playing their way in.
I'll be surprised if Kevin Newman is the starting shortstop. I feel like Jose Barrero is the guy to start the season, but he is not safe by any means because of how many good shortstop prospects the Reds actually have waiting.
Now, the shortstop prospects are a little bit on the young side of the minors, though, for most of them. I'm trying to is Christian Encarnacion straight? I thought he was an outfielder. He is, right?
He's a third baseman, first baseman.
Oh, okay.
So they got like Noel V. Marte, who played at high A last year. They have Ellie De La Cruz, who made it to double A. He's the guy that I could definitely see him making the majors by the end of the year this year.
Yeah, by the end of the year, absolutely. I could see both of those guys being in the majors.
That's true.
It's opening day is kind of where I'm more a little confused as to who's going to be there. So
I think it's going to be Barrero to start the year.
Okay. But with both Marte and Ellie De La Cruz, and there's like 3 other shortstops that they all got from the Mariners in the trade for Luis Castillo. Who were they? It
was Edwin Arroyo, and then another guy they drafted, Matt McLean. So they've got plenty of shortstops right now.
And then Chase Petty's a shortstop too, right?
Don't know.
Because they got him in I'm dumb. Wow, that's not even kind of close. That they play within like 15 feet of each other. Same thing.
Yeah.
Whatever. But yeah, they've got a lot of young guys who they're not quite at major league roster level yet. Encarnacion Strand very well could be. He is raking right now in spring. 577, which is a bit out of character for him because he's a power guy with not very great contact skills. So the fact that he's hitting almost 600 in spring, probably not true, especially in the small sample size. The 4 home runs, however, probably very, very, very true.
This guy's going to be a power hitter for sure.
Yes, this is a guy that is going to love playing in Great American Ballpark. And I think that he'll be doing just fine. Yep. So, and then does he also happen to be a lefty? He does not happen to be a lefty. That would have been very convenient because then he would really love Great American Ballpark. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's probably got some oppo power and he'll use the home run alley that they've got there blown across from third base to right field. So yeah.
Just last thing on their outfielders. They've got a lot of very fast outfielders. Jake Fraley, TJ Friedel, and then they recently traded for Will Benson, who didn't have any spot with the Guardians team. He's a former first-round pick. Seems like it took him a really long time to make it to the majors. He finally made it last year. And there was no room for him on that team. And he's always seemed to struggle at every level that he plays at. And then he figures it out. So if he continues that trend, then he could be really interesting as like a fast guy with like power and center field defense. So keep an eye on Will Benson.
Yeah, he really does. Like I was just looking at his stats here, and at every level, he's got like most of a season not good, then like half a season he kills it, and then he gets moved up, and then like most of the season again. Not good. Yeah, that's wild. Well, dang. Although his kind of downswing in AAA was not nearly as long as at some of the other levels. So he figured that one out pretty quick. It only took him 27 games, and then he went off and 278, 426, 522, then 18% walk rate at AAA. 18.
Yeah. So he's got some skills.
Yes. So yeah, he could be really, really interesting if he can do that at the major league level. Sure. So my question here, do the Reds actually have outfielders at all the outfield positions this year? I mean, technically Nick Senzel became an outfielder, but like he never should have been.
Yeah, and Senzel's still there. He's coming back from an injury right now as he does. But yeah, I really like this group of outfielders. They're not like amazing and they're not established at this point, but with Fraley and Friedel, those guys are also very interesting in my opinion. So I think some group of 3 outfielders is going to emerge, and they're actually going to be good for the Reds this year. That's my prediction.
And Will Myers will not be one of them.
Yeah, I think people are getting excited about Will Myers playing in Great American Ballpark, but I'm really not that excited.
I'm not that excited about Will Myers playing anywhere. He's still Will Myers.
He's still Will Myers. Yeah.
But no, well, the Reds fans got to have something to be excited about.
Yep. So that's the National League Central. Do we have any closing wrap up kind of thoughts on this division as a whole?
This is an interesting division. It's not, as I mentioned up at the top of the hour, this is not going to be the best division in the league. I could guarantee you that. Is it going to be one of the most interesting? Also,
Depends
probably not, but it really depends on what you care about.
Yeah.
But no, I think there is a very real chance that two of these teams, maybe even three, could really surprise people and be a lot better than we're expecting. This division could be way better than any of us are expecting, but, and this is a really, really big but, it rides on a lot of young, unproven prospects that have really high ceilings. Some of them have high floors, and guys like Jordan Walker and guys like Christopher Morel. In some of these guys, these young pitchers in Lodolo and Hunter Green, like, if we can see these guys go off and have their true breakouts and become superstars, and then you see some of these other maybe less highly touted prospects, your Jack Sawinskis and all that, and they come and they start showing up for teams like the Reds and the Pirates, and then this division could very easily go from being one of the worst to being somewhere in the middle to a very interesting race at the end of the season. Like, I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in that. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, I would probably say this is still going to be one of the weaker divisions this year, but it has potential, which is not necessarily something we could have said for the last few years.
Yeah, the potential thing is definitely, I agree with that completely, because there's some teams that are like maybe a little bit better than the Reds and the Pirates around the league, but I have less faith in their long-term future. I feel like the Reds and the Pirates are both headed in the right direction. Whether they actually execute and whether their prospects all pan out and everything, we don't know about that. But
in whether those two teams specifically, their owners don't get in the way, which I think they will.
Yeah, that's already part of the problem. So
yes,
there's always that. But at least from like a baseball team building perspective, like, I feel like they're both on the right track. The Cubs are clearly also on the right track based on their offseason and how their prospect system is kind of developed. Cardinals and Brewers obviously, remain competitive every year, basically. So status quo.
Yeah, status quo.
I was
about to start singing "Stick to the Status Quo" from High School Musical. I decided to spare you guys the.
We'll have to save that for a future episode.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap us up for this episode. Next week we'll be back with the AL East preview, and we'll talk to you then. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. If you enjoy card collecting, check out our sister YouTube channel at Getaway Day Cards.